Commander Jinwoo stared at the massive crystal structures floating in the asteroid belt through the viewport of his ship's sole horizon and felt his heart race with excitement because this was exactly what Earth needed right now when their home planet was running out of rare metals and materials for their growing space program, and these crystals looked like they contained everything from titanium to platinum, and maybe even some elements they had never seen before, which could change everything for humanity. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the life support systems and the occasional beep from the navigation console, where Taehyun was calculating their approach vector to the largest crystal formation, while Mina sat at her engineering station running scans on the strange structures and shaking her head in amazement at the readings she was getting, because the crystals were not just beautiful, but also incredibly dense with valuable materials. Captain the Bow. Scans are showing massive deposits of rare Earth elements inside those crystal formations, and if we can extract even a small portion of what I am seeing here, we could solve Earth's resource shortage for the next 50 years, Mina said while adjusting her scanner settings to get better readings on the internal structure of the crystals, which seemed to have some kind of organized pattern that reminded her of circuit boards, but made from natural materials. Yuna looked up from her communications console where she had been monitoring all frequencies for any signs of activity in the system, but everything was silent except for the normal background radiation of space and the occasional burst of energy from the distant star, which was a small, yellow sun very similar to Earth's own Sol, which made this system feel almost like home, even though they were hundreds of light years away from their real home. No signals on any frequency. Captain and I have been scanning for the past 6 hours. Since we arrived in this system, and there is nothing that suggests any intelligent life or active technology anywhere within range of our sensors, Yuna reported while continuing to sweep through different communication bands, just to make sure they were not missing anything important, because the last thing they wanted was to accidentally interfere with someone else's operations. Jinwoo nodded and made his decision, because Earth's Space Command had sent them out here specifically to find new sources of materials, and these crystals were exactly what they needed, and there was no sign of any other intelligent life in the system, so they had every right to claim salvage rights under the interstellar laws that Earth had established for their expanding space program, even though those laws had never been tested with actual alien contact. All right, team, we are going to begin salvage operations on the largest crystal formation, and Mina, I want you to prepare the mining drones while Taehyun plots us a safe approach that keeps us clear of any unstable sections. And Yuna, keep monitoring for any changes in the area, because even though this looks abandoned, I want to make sure we are not walking into any surprises, Jinwoo ordered, while settling back into his captain's chair and feeling the familiar weight of command responsibility. The Sol horizon moved slowly toward the crystal formation, which was roughly the size of a small moon, and seemed to pulse with internal light that created beautiful patterns across its surface, like aurora dancing through frozen lightning, and as they got closer, the crystals became even more magnificent with layers upon layers of different colored minerals, creating a rainbow effect that took everyone's breath away. Mina launched the first mining drone, which was a small automated vehicle equipped with cutting lasers and sample collection equipment, and as soon as it touched the crystal surface, something unexpected happened, because the entire formation began to glow brighter and emit a low-frequency vibration that they could feel through the ship's hull, even though they were still several kilometers away from the main structure. Captain, I am getting some strange readings from the crystal, and it almost looks like there is some kind of reaction to our presence, but the energy patterns do not match anything in our database of known technologies or natural phenomena, Mina reported, while frantically checking her instruments, because the readings were unlike anything she had ever seen in her 15 years as a space engineer. The mining drone began cutting into the crystal surface, and immediately the glow intensified and spread throughout the entire formation, like ripples in a pond. And suddenly other crystal structures throughout the asteroid belt began responding with their own light displays, creating a network of communication that none of the humans understood, but which was clearly some kind of coordinated response to their activities. Taehyun was the first to notice that the crystals were not just glowing randomly, but seemed to be pulsing in patterns that repeated every few seconds like a heartbeat or breathing, And when he pointed this out to the rest of the crew, they all realized that what they had assumed were mineral formations might actually be something much more complex and possibly even alive. "Captain, what if these are not just crystals, but some kind of life form that we do not recognize because they are so different from carbon-based life on Earth, and maybe our mining operation is actually hurting them or causing them pain?" Tae-hyun said quietly, because the idea was both fascinating and terrifying at the same time, since it would mean they had just committed an act of violence against an unknown alien species. Before Jinwoo could respond to this possibility, Yuna suddenly straightened at her console because she was picking up signals that had not been there before, and they were coming from deep space, beyond the edge of the solar system, and getting stronger by the minute, which meant that something was approaching their location at incredible speed. "Captain, I am detecting multiple ships approaching from outside the system, and they are traveling faster than anything in our fleet, and will be here in less than 2 hours based on their current speed and trajectory," Yuna announced, while trying to get better details about the approaching vessels, but their technology was clearly far more advanced than anything humanity had ever developed. The crystal formations throughout the asteroid belt were now pulsing in perfect synchronization and emitting energy bursts that were clearly some kind of distress signal being broadcast in all directions, and it was obvious that their mining operation had triggered this response and somehow called for help from whoever owned or protected these crystal beings. Jinwoo realized they were in serious trouble because, if these crystals were actually living beings, then humanity had just committed what could be considered an act of war against an alien species, with technology far superior to their own, and the approaching ships were probably coming to defend the crystals or seek revenge for the damage that had already been done. Mina recall all mining drones immediately and prepare the ship for emergency departure, while Tae-hyun calculates a jump route back to Earth and Yuna try to establish communication with the approaching ships and see if we can explain that this was all a misunderstanding, Jinwoo ordered, while feeling his stomach drop, because he knew this situation was about to become much worse. The mining drones were recalled, but the damage was already done, because several sections of crystal had been cut away and transported to their cargo hold, and the crystal beings were clearly in distress based on the intensity of their light displays and the increasing frequency of their distress. Signals which were now being answered by more ships appearing at the edge of the system. Back on Earth, Director Hajin was monitoring the Seoul Horizon mission from the Space Command Center in Seoul when he received the emergency transmission from Jinwoo, explaining their situation and requesting immediate assistance because they had accidentally attacked what appeared to be an alien life form and hostile ships were approaching their position. "Get me President Subin immediately and activate all defense protocols because we may be about to face our first contact with an alien civilization, and it looks like we have already made a terrible first impression," Hajin ordered, while watching the data stream from the Seoul Horizon and realizing that humanity was about to face the consequences of their expansion into space. War Prime Gorvak of the Saurian Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship Crushing Fang and studied the tactical display showing the small blue planet that was home to the aggressive species that had dared to attack peaceful crystal miners in the Kepler system, and he felt both anger and curiosity because in his 300 years of military service he had never encountered a species foolish enough to launch unprovoked attacks against Galactic Council members. The Pacification Fleet consisted of 50,000 warships from 12 different species, all united under the Council's authority to maintain peace throughout the galaxy, and they had responded to this crisis exactly according to Protocol 847, which was designed to deal with primitive species that showed dangerous aggressive tendencies before they could become a threat to galactic civilization. Communications officer establish contact with the primitive world and transmit the standard surrender demand in all known languages and mathematical sequences because even the most backward species usually understand basic mathematics and can recognize when they are completely outmatched by superior forces, Gorvak ordered, while watching the small human fleet of barely 200 ships position themselves between the Council Armada and their home planet on Earth. President Subin sat in the Emergency Command Center deep beneath the Capitol building and watched the massive alien fleet take positions around their solar system while her advisors frantically tried to establish communication with the invaders, who seemed to be waiting for some kind of response from humanity, but their technology was so advanced that Earth's computers could barely process the data streams they were receiving. "Madam President, We are receiving what appears to be a surrender demand from the alien fleet, and our translation computers are working on converting their mathematical sequences into readable text. But it will take at least an hour to fully decode their message. Communications. Director Yuna reported, while teams of linguists and mathematicians worked around the clock to understand the alien communication, Chief Science Advisor Wu Jin approached. The president with a tablet full of analysis data about the alien fleet, and his face was pale because the numbers were terrifying and showed that humanity was facing an enemy with technology centuries beyond their own capabilities and firepower that could destroy Earth's entire civilization in a matter of hours. Madam President, based on our sensor readings, the alien fleet has approximately 50,000 ships ranging from destroyers, the size of our largest battleships, to command vessels that are bigger than our space stations, and their energy signatures suggest weapons powerful enough to crack planets like eggs. Wu Jin explained while showing her the comparison charts that made Earth's defenses look like toys. Admiral Kyung stood in the command center of the orbital defense platform Luna Base and studied the alien formations through his tactical displays, while his staff prepared Earth's modest fleet for what would probably be the last battle in human history. But he was determined to make the aliens pay dearly for every human life they took. All ships maintain defensive positions around Earth and prepare to implement Protocol Chaos on my command, because even if we cannot win this fight, we can make sure these aliens remember that humanity does not surrender without a fight. Admiral Kyung announced over the fleet communication network while checking the status of every ship under his command. The surrender demand finally came through Earth's translation. Systems and President Subin read it with growing horror, because the aliens were demanding that humanity abandon Earth and relocate to designated reservation worlds where they would be monitored and controlled to prevent future aggressive actions against peaceful galactic citizens. They want us to leave our home planet and become prisoners on alien worlds because they believe we are a threat to galactic peace, and they are giving us 72 hours to comply with their demands or face complete destruction. President Subin announced to her cabinet while trying to keep her voice steady, because she knew that humanity would never accept such terms. Tactical Officer Soman worked alongside Admiral Kyung to analyze the alien fleet movements, and she noticed that their formations were very organized and predictable, following what appeared to be standard military doctrines that emphasized overwhelming force and intimidation rather than actual combat effectiveness, which gave her an idea about how humanity might survive this encounter. Admiral, the alien formations are following classical battle patterns that we studied in military academy, and they seem to expect us to respond with similar tactics. But what if we completely abandon conventional warfare and use strategies they have never encountered before? Soman suggested, while highlighting weaknesses in the alien positioning. The 72-hour deadline passed without any response from Earth because humanity had spent those hours preparing their defenses and trying to find diplomatic solutions, but the aliens interpreted the silence as defiance, and War Prime Gorvak gave the order to begin the standard suppression strike that had worked against every other primitive species. Begin Phase 1. Suppression against the primitive vessels and target their largest ships first to demonstrate our overwhelming superiority and force their surrender before we have to destroy their entire fleet, Gorvak commanded, while expecting the human ships to either flee or surrender as soon as they realized the hopelessness of their situation. Captain Do-yun commanded the destroyer Busan's Pride and received Admiral Kyung's order to implement Protocol Chaos, which was a tactical doctrine that Earth's military had developed specifically for fighting against superior enemies by using unpredictable movements and unconventional strategies that confused traditional military thinking instead of forming battle. Lines like the aliens expected the human ships scattered in seemingly random directions and began using the debris fields around Earth's orbital installations as cover while launching attacks from unexpected angles that made it impossible for the alien targeting systems to predict their movements. All ships execute random pattern Delta 7 and use the asteroid mining platforms as cover while launching coordinated strikes against their forward scouts. And remember that our goal is not to win, but to survive long enough to make them reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities, Captain Do-yun transmitted, while his ship dove through a cloud of space debris. The first alien casualties came as a complete shock to War Prime. Gorvak because his scouts were being destroyed by human ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, using tactics that made no sense according to any known military doctrine, and the humans were somehow turning their technological disadvantage into a strategic advantage. Engineer Mina had returned to Earth during the preparation period and was now working with engineer Hyunjin at the main shipyard to rapidly convert civilian vessels into military ships using unconventional designs that combined cargo haulers with military weapons, creating hybrid vessels that did not match any classification in galactic military databases. We need to build ships that the aliens cannot understand or predict, so take these mining platforms and attach military-grade weapons while keeping their industrial equipment, because confusion is our best weapon against an enemy that thinks they know everything about warfare, Mina explained while teams of workers welded weapons onto civilian ships. The Battle of Luna began when the alien vanguard tried to establish control over Earth's moon and encountered Captain Do Yun's destroyers hiding in the lunar shadow, using the moon's gravity well to slingshot their attacks at impossible angles, while smaller human fighters emerged from lunar caves like angry wasps defending their nest. War Prime Gorvak watched his tactical display with growing confusion as human ships used maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat by diving into gravity wells that should have destroyed them and using debris fields that should have been obstacles as weapons against his more advanced vessels. How are these primitives surviving against our superior firepower, and why are their tactics so impossible to predict when they should be following basic military logic? Gorvak demanded from his tactical advisors, who could only shake their heads because human behavior was unlike anything in their military databases. The human ships continued their chaotic dance around the lunar battlefield, destroying alien vessels through sheer unpredictability while taking casualties that would have broken any other species. But somehow the humans kept fighting with desperate creativity that turned every disadvantage into a weapon. Admiral Kyung coordinated the defense from Luna Base, while watching his outnumbered fleet hold their own against impossible odds through pure determination and tactical innovation that came from humanity's long history of fighting against superior enemies and never knowing when to quit. All ships continue random attack patterns, and remember that every alien ship we destroy makes them question their assumptions about human capabilities, and the longer we survive, the more likely they are to realize that this war will cost them more than they expected. Admiral Kyung broadcast while watching the battle turn into a grinding conflict. War Prime Gorvak realized after 6 hours of combat that his suppression strike had failed completely because the humans were still fighting with undiminished fury. The Battle of Luna had been raging for 3 weeks, and War Prime Gorvak stood on his bridge staring at casualty reports that made no sense because his pacification fleet had lost over 300 ships to a primitive species that should have surrendered after the first demonstration of galactic firepower, but instead, the humans kept fighting with tactics that seemed to come from the minds of organized madmen. Captain Do Yun guided his heavily damaged destroyer Busan's Pride through another impossible maneuver that used Jupiter's gravity well to accelerate his ship to speeds that should have torn it apart, but somehow the human vessel held together long enough to launch a surprise attack against an alien supply convoy that was trying to establish a forward base on one of the outer moon's engineering report status on our structural integrity, because I need to know if we can survive another gravity slingshot maneuver around Saturn's rings, or if this old ship is finally going to fall apart on us. Captain Do-hyun called to his engine room while dodging plasma bursts from 3 alien fighters that were trying to corner his ship. Engineer Hyunjun worked frantically in the main Earth shipyard, converting a massive cargo hauler into something that looked like a flying scrapyard, but was actually a sophisticated weapons platform disguised as industrial equipment, because the aliens had learned to target obvious military vessels, but ignored ships that appeared to be civilian contractors. We are attaching mining lasers to the cargo sections and installing missile tubes inside the storage compartments while keeping the external appearance of a commercial freight hauler. So when the aliens scan us, they will see a harmless supply ship instead of a heavily armed battle platform. Hyunjin explained to his team while they welded weapons systems into places where they should not fit. The alien fleet had requested reinforcements twice because War Prime Gorvak could not explain to the Galactic Council why a species with primitive technology was managing to inflict significant casualties on the most advanced military force in the galaxy, and every day the humans survived made the Council question their assumptions about inferior civilizations. Scientist Yunbi made a breakthrough discovery while analyzing captured alien technology in her laboratory deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, where Earth's scientists were working around the clock. To understand how galactic civilization had developed such advanced weapons and defenses, and whether humanity could copy or counter their capabilities. The alien targeting systems operate on quantum frequencies that assume enemy vessels will follow. Predictable flight patterns based on logical tactical decisions, but human neural patterns create quantum interference because our brains evolved to make rapid, unpredictable decisions in life or death situations, Yunbi explained to the military. Advisors who were trying to understand why human ships seemed invisible to alien sensors, pilot Seojun volunteered to test the ghost frequency technology that Yunbi had developed based on her discovery about human neural patterns. And he climbed into a modified fighter that had been equipped with devices designed to amplify the quantum interference created by human brain activity and make his ship effectively invisible to alien detection systems. Remember that this is completely experimental technology, and we have no idea what the long-term effects might be on your nervous system, but if this works, it could give us the advantage we need to survive this war, Eunbi warned while checking the neural interface equipment that would connect Seojun's brain directly to his ship's systems. The test flight was more successful than anyone had dared to hope because Seojun's fighter became completely invisible to alien sensors while maintaining full maneuverability and weapons capability, which meant that humanity had accidentally discovered a way to turn their own biology into a weapon against galactic technology. War Prime Gorvak received reports of ships appearing and disappearing without explanation and attacking his vessels with impossible precision before vanishing again like ghosts, and his tactical advisors could only suggest that the humans had somehow developed stealth technology that was more advanced than anything in the galactic databases. How can a primitive species develop technology that our best scientists cannot detect or counter when they should barely understand the basics of space travel, and yet they are making our most advanced sensors useless? Gorvak demanded, while watching another of his cruisers explode from weapons fire that seemed to come from empty space. Colonel Junho led Earth's ground forces in preparing defensive positions around major cities and military installations because everyone knew that eventually the aliens would try to land troops on Earth's surface, and the fighting would shift from space battles to planetary warfare, where humanity's experience with ground combat might give them some advantage. We are setting up urban warfare scenarios in every major city and training civilian volunteers to use captured alien weapons because if they manage to land troops on our planet, we need every human ready to fight for their homes and families, Colonel Junho announced, while reviewing defensive plans with his officers. Dr. Yeji worked in biological warfare laboratories developing weapons based on Earth's aggressive microorganisms that could devastate alien biology because most galactic species had evolved on worlds with much less hostile environments, and their immune systems would be unprepared for Earth's bacteria and viruses. We are weaponizing everything from the common cold to aggressive fungal infections because alien biology appears to have no natural defenses against Earth pathogens. And we can create biological weapons that will incapacitate their troops without harming human defenders, Dr. Yeji explained, while working with samples of alien tissue recovered from destroyed ships. The Galactic Council held another emergency session, because 3 different species had now reported that the human resistance was unlike anything they had encountered in 10,000 years of galactic civilization, and some council members were beginning to question whether the pacification mission should continue. Ambassador Nari from the Hive Mind Collective presented her analysis of human tactical patterns to the Council and explained that human behavior was impossible to predict because it contradicted all logical principles of warfare and seemed to be based on organized chaos rather than strategic planning. The humans fight like organized madmen with mathematical precision, and their tactics make no sense according to any known military doctrine, but somehow they are effective against our superior technology and numbers, Ambassador Nari reported while displaying battle recordings that showed human ships performing impossible maneuvers. Fleet Commander Jin Yuk coordinated humanity's space defenses from his command. ship souls hope, and watched as more human vessels joined the fight every day because Earth's shipyards were working beyond capacity to convert civilian ships into military platforms using unconventional designs that confused alien targeting systems. We have cargo haulers armed with mining lasers, passenger ships equipped with missile launchers, and even space tugs carrying nuclear warheads, because our strategy is to make every human vessel a potential threat that the aliens cannot ignore or predict, Fleet Commander Jin Yuk explained to his staff. The alien siege of Earth entered its fourth week, and War Prime Gorvak was forced to admit that his mission had failed because the humans showed no signs of surrendering, despite taking heavy casualties, and his own fleet was being worn down by constant attacks from ships that appeared and disappeared without warning. Admiral Kyung launched Operation Moonshot, which was humanity's most desperate gambit yet, because it involved using Earth's moon itself as a weapon by installing massive engines on the lunar surface and threatening to crash the moon into the alien fleet if they did not withdraw from Earth's solar system. We are going to move our own moon out of orbit and use it as the largest kinetic weapon in human history, because if we cannot defeat the aliens with conventional tactics, then we will show them that humanity is willing to destroy everything, including themselves, rather than surrender. Admiral Kyung announced while teams of engineers worked to install the lunar propulsion system. The alien fleet detected the massive energy signatures coming from Earth's moon and War Prime. Gorvak realized that the humans were actually planning to weaponize their own satellite, which was a level of desperate madness that no galactic species had ever attempted because it would destroy their own planet's tidal systems. Contact the Galactic Council immediately and inform them that these humans are planning to destroy their own moon to use as a weapon against our fleet, which demonstrates a level of suicidal determination that makes them too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. Gorvak ordered while watching the lunar engines come online. President Subin authorized Operation Moonshot, despite knowing that it would cause massive environmental damage to Earth, because the alternative was complete conquest by an alien empire that viewed humanity as a threat to galactic peace and would never allow them to develop their own civilization. The moon began to move slowly out of its normal orbit, and the alien fleet scrambled to avoid the massive satellite that was now accelerating toward their formations, while human ships provided covering fire to protect the lunar engines from alien attempts to destroy the propulsion system. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from 12 different species tried to understand how a primitive world had managed to hold off the most powerful military force in the galaxy for over a month when the pacification should have been completed in 6 hours, according to every military manual and historical precedent. Counselor Velthar of the Crystalline Hegemony stood at the center podium and addressed the assembled delegates with growing concern because the reports from the human front were unlike anything the Council had dealt with in their 10,000-year history of maintaining galactic peace and order. Honored delegates, we are facing an unprecedented situation because the human species has demonstrated tactical capabilities that defy our understanding of primitive warfare, and they have inflicted casualties on our forces that exceed the losses from our last 50 pacification missions combined, Velthar announced, while displaying battle statistics that shocked even the most experienced military representatives. Ambassador Nari from the Hive Mind Collective presented her detailed analysis of human behavior patterns and explained that the humans seemed to operate on principles that contradicted every logical approach to warfare because they made decisions based on unpredictable factors that no galactic computer could calculate or counter. The human neural patterns create quantum interference with our targeting systems, and their tactical decisions appear to be based on organized chaos rather than strategic planning, which makes them impossible to predict or defeat using conventional military doctrine, Ambassador Nari reported while showing brain scan comparisons between humans and other galactic species. Supreme Admiral Zarthok of the Military Council reviewed the casualty reports with growing alarm because losing over 800 ships to a species that barely understood faster-than-light travel was not just embarrassing, but potentially dangerous if other primitive worlds decided to follow the human example of resistance. If word spreads throughout the galaxy that a primitive species successfully resisted Council authority, then we could face rebellions from dozens of worlds that currently accept our guidance, and the entire foundation of galactic civilization could be threatened. Supreme Admiral Zarthok warned, while calculating the political implications of the human resistance. War Prime Gorvak transmitted his situation report from the battlefield and explained that the humans had weaponized their own moon and were threatening to use it as a kinetic weapon against his fleet while simultaneously launching coordinated attacks from ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The humans have demonstrated a level of desperate creativity that no other species has ever shown, and they are willing to destroy their own planetary systems rather than surrender, which makes them unlike any enemy we have ever faced, Gorvak reported, while watching Earth's moon continue its slow but inexorable approach toward his fleet formations. Back on Earth, Commander Jinwoo and his original crew had been stranded in Council space when the war began, but they had managed to capture a small alien scout ship and were now using it to gather intelligence about galactic civilization while trying to find a way to return home. We have learned that the Galactic Council controls over 10,000 inhabited worlds, and they maintain peace through overwhelming military superiority, but they have not faced a real war in thousands of years, which means their military doctrine is based on intimidation rather than actual combat experience, Jinwoo explained. To his crew while studying captured galactic databases, Mina discovered that most galactic species had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation and logic were more important than competition and violence, which meant that their approach to warfare was based on mathematical calculations and predictable strategies rather than the chaotic improvisation that humans had developed through millions of years of evolutionary conflict. The aliens fight like they are playing a game with established rules, but humans fight like our lives depend on it, because that is exactly how we evolved and our entire species learned to survive by adapting to impossible situations, Mina observed while analyzing alien military training programs. Tae-hyun found evidence that the galaxy had been at peace for so long that most species had forgotten how to fight effectively, and their military forces were more like police units designed to intimidate rebellious populations rather than actual combat forces, capable of defeating a determined enemy. Their ships are powerful, but their tactics are predictable because they expect every species to follow the same logical patterns, and when we do something that makes no sense to them, their entire strategy falls apart. Tae-hyun explained, while reviewing battle recordings from the Council's perspective. Yuna intercepted communications between different alien fleets and discovered that the Council was beginning to panic because the human resistance was lasting far longer than any previous pacification mission, and some species were starting to question whether humans might actually win this impossible war. The aliens are scared because we are proving that their superior technology is not enough to guarantee victory against a species that refuses to follow their rules, and some of their own military commanders are suggesting that they should negotiate rather than continue fighting, Yuna reported while monitoring alien communication. Channels on Earth President Subin received reports that several minor alien species had secretly contacted human representatives to express support for the resistance because they were tired of Council control and saw humanity's fight as inspiration for their own independence movements. We are receiving covert messages from at least 6 different worlds offering to provide intelligence and supplies if we can continue our resistance, because our fight has become a symbol of hope for species that want freedom from Council domination, President Subin announced to her cabinet while reviewing the secret communications. Chief Science Advisor Woo Jin analyzed captured alien technology and discovered that galactic civilization had become dependent on automated systems and artificial intelligence, which made their forces predictable and vulnerable to the chaotic human tactics that confused their computer programs. The aliens rely too heavily on technology to make their tactical decisions, and when we do something that their computers cannot predict, their entire command structure becomes paralyzed because they have forgotten how to think creatively, Woo Jin explained, while demonstrating how human unpredictability crashed. Alien tactical computers, Admiral Kyung coordinated the lunar weapon project while simultaneously launching new attacks against alien supply lines because he realized that the key to victory was not defeating the alien fleet but making the war so costly that the Council would be forced to reconsider their invasion. We cannot win through superior firepower, but we can win by making this war more expensive than the Council is willing to pay, and every day we survive makes them question whether controlling humanity is worth the cost," Admiral Keong explained while reviewing strategic options. The Galactic Council voted to send additional reinforcements to the human front, but several species expressed concern about the precedent. This would set because using excessive force against a primitive world could encourage other species to resist Council authority. Councillor Velthar privately contacted other moderate representatives to discuss the possibility of negotiating with the humans, because the war was becoming politically dangerous, and some council members were beginning to question whether humanity might be too dangerous to be allowed to exist. If we cannot defeat them quickly, then we must consider whether it would be safer to destroy their entire world rather than risk them spreading their resistance tactics to other species, Velthar suggested while reviewing options for ending the conflict. Meanwhile, the human resistance continued to grow stronger. As civilian volunteers joined the fight, and Earth's industries converted completely to military production, while scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons based on captured alien technology, Dr. Yeji completed her biological warfare program and reported that Earth's microorganisms could potentially devastate the entire alien fleet because galactic species had no natural immunity to the aggressive pathogens that had evolved in Earth's hostile environment. "We have weaponized everything from bacterial infections to parasitic organisms, and if we can deliver these biological agents to the alien ships, we could disable their entire fleet without firing a single conventional weapon," Dr. Yeji announced while preparing deployment systems. The war entered its second month, and both sides began to realize that this conflict would determine the future of galactic civilization, because if humanity won, then the Council's authority would be broken forever. But if the aliens won, they would have to exterminate an entire species to maintain their control. The final battle began when War Prime Gorvak made his last desperate attempt to break through Earth's orbital defenses before the weaponized moon could reach his fleet and destroy the most powerful armada in galactic history. But Fleet Commander Jin Hyuk was ready with humanity's most audacious plan yet. "All ships prepare for Operation Final Stand, and remember that we are not just fighting for Earth, but for the right of every species in the galaxy to determine their own destiny without Council interference," Fleet Commander Jin Hyuk announced, while coordinating the movements of over 300 human vessels that had been converted from civilian ships into weapons of war. The human fleet attacked using every impossible tactic they had developed during 2 months of desperate warfare, and the aliens watched in horror as cargo ships launched nuclear missiles while passenger liners fired mining lasers and even space tugs became kamikaze weapons that crashed into alien vessels with devastating effect. Captain Do-Yun led his destroyer squadron in a final charge against the alien command ship, while Earth's moon continued its inexorable approach toward the main alien fleet, and the entire solar system held its breath as humanity gambled everything on one last throw of the dice, War Prime. Gorvak stood on his bridge watching the tactical display as human ships swarmed around his fleet like angry insects and realized that his superior technology meant nothing against an enemy that refused to follow any logical pattern of behavior. "Contact Earth immediately and demand to speak with their leaders, because I need to understand how a primitive species has managed to fight the entire Galactic Council to a standstill," Gorvak ordered while his fleet prepared for what could be their final battle. President Subin received the alien communication request and decided that this might be humanity's only chance to explain their side of the story before the final battle destroyed both fleets and possibly Earth itself. "Put me through to their commander and activate all translation protocols, because if we are going to die today, then at least we can make sure they understand why we fought," President Subin ordered while walking to the communication center. The conversation between President Subin and War Prime Gorvak was transmitted across the entire battlefield as both leaders tried to understand how first contact had gone so terribly wrong, and why two civilizations were about to destroy each other over what might have been a simple misunderstanding. "Your species attacked peaceful crystal miners in the Kepler system, and when we came to enforce galactic law, you responded with unprecedented violence instead of accepting our authority," Gorvak explained while trying to understand human logic. President Subin listened to the translation and suddenly realized that the entire war had started because of a tragic misunderstanding when Commander Jinwoo's salvage operation had accidentally attacked living beings that appeared to be mineral formations. Our people had no idea that the crystals were alive because we had never encountered silicon-based life forms and we thought we were salvaging abandoned mining equipment, not attacking living beings. President Subin explained. While hoping that the truth might prevent total annihilation, translator Yuna worked frantically to establish better communication protocols while both fleets held their fire and waited to see if this conversation could end the war that had already cost thousands of lives on both sides. Commander Jinwoo finally managed to return to the solar system in his captured alien scout ship and immediately transmitted his own account of the original incident while providing evidence that the crystal attack had been completely accidental. We have recordings of our original mission that prove we had no hostile intent, and we tried to withdraw as soon as we realized we had made contact with alien life, but your ships arrived before we could establish proper communication, Jinwoo reported while broadcasting his mission logs. War Prime Gorvak reviewed the human evidence and began to understand that the entire conflict had started because of a first contact protocol failure rather than deliberate human aggression, but he also realized that the human resistance had revealed something much more important. Chief Science Advisor Wu Jin was given permission to explain humanity's unique situation to the alien commander, and he began describing how Earth was what galactic scientists would classify as a death world, where survival required constant adaptation and competition. Our planet has experienced 5 mass extinction events, and 99% of all species that ever lived on Earth died out, which means that humans evolved specifically to survive impossible situations by adapting and fighting when retreat was not an option. Wu Jin explained while transmitting Earth's geological and evolutionary history. The Galactic Council listened to this transmission with growing amazement because they had never encountered a species that evolved under such hostile conditions, and they began to understand why human behavior was so different from every other civilization they had contacted. Your species evolved on a world that would be classified as a maximum security prison planet by our standards, and you survived by developing capabilities that no other species possesses. War Prime Gorvak acknowledged while reviewing Earth's environmental data ambassador Nari, added her analysis of human psychology, and explained that humans treated extinction-level threats as normal Tuesday afternoon problems because their entire evolutionary history was about surviving disasters that would have destroyed any other species. The humans do not follow logical warfare patterns because they evolved in an environment where logic was less important than creativity and adaptation, and they are willing to sacrifice everything for survival, because that is literally how they became the dominant species on their world, Ambassador Nari reported. The crystal beings from the Kepler system transmitted their own message forgiving the humans for the accidental attack and requesting that they be allowed to establish formal diplomatic relations because they were fascinated by a species that could turn mining equipment into weapons. In a matter of hours, President Subin realized that this was humanity's chance to transform a disastrous first contact into an opportunity for peaceful integration with galactic civilization, but only if they could prove that humans were not inherently violent despite their terrifying military capabilities. We propose that humanity be given full membership in the Galactic Council, not as conquered subjects, but as specialists in survival and adaptation, because every civilization eventually faces extinction-level events, and we have learned how to overcome the impossible, President Subin offered, while the entire galaxy waited for the Council's response. The Galactic Council voted after intense debate and decided to offer humanity full membership, with a unique role as the Department of Impossible Problems, because their analysis showed that human capabilities could be invaluable when other species faced disasters that conventional wisdom said were unsurvivable. We formally invite humanity to join galactic civilization as equals, and we assign you responsibility for handling crisis situations that require unconventional solutions because your species has demonstrated abilities that complement our own peaceful development, Counselor Velthar announced. War Prime Gorvak ordered his fleet to stand down and formally apologized for the misunderstanding while requesting permission to study human military tactics because the Council realized that their own forces had become weak. Through lack of real combat experience, Admiral Kyung canceled Operation Moonshot and began the delicate process of returning Earth's moon to its proper orbit, while human and alien engineers worked together to repair the environmental damage caused. By the Lunar Engine's fleet commander Jin Hyuk coordinated the peaceful withdrawal of both fleets while maintaining defensive positions, because trust would take time to build, but both sides now understood that they had more to gain from cooperation than continued warfare. Dr. Yeji shared her biological research with galactic scientists who were amazed by the diversity and aggressiveness of Earth's microorganisms, and they began developing new medical treatments based on humanity's natural immunity to hostile pathogens. The war officially ended when President Subin signed the Treaty of Solar Integration, which established humanity as the galaxy's emergency response specialists and gave Earth the resources needed to develop their technology to galactic standards. Today, humanity takes its place among the stars not as conquerors, but as the species that other civilizations call when everything else has failed, and they need someone crazy enough to fight the impossible and win, President Subin announced while signing the treaty that would change the galaxy forever. 6 months later, when the Andromedan crisis threatened to destroy 3 entire star systems, the Galactic Council sent their first official request to Earth's new Department of Impossible Problems, and humanity responded by doing exactly what they did best, which was finding a way to survive and thrive when everyone else said it could not be done.